students, let's get started. I want to make a wise use of your time so that we don't run late to the next session. I'm really looking forward to that. My name is Mary Kay Janke, and welcome to Skyrocket, the reading instruction in your classical classroom. If you would please join me in a word of prayer before we get started. Dear Father, I just thank you so much for the opportunity to get to teach children how to love reading and how to love learning. Father, I don't take for granted what a privilege that is and what a responsibility that is. I just pray that each teacher in this room, each mom, each dad in this room, that you would fill them with the wisdom to know just the right way to reach each child. Because we know ultimately, Lord, our goal is to lead our children's hearts towards you. So I just pray that these next few moments would be just an opportunity to talk about this great responsibility and this great privilege. Thank you, Lord, so much, and we love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Well, welcome. I'm so excited. I'm actually going to be telling you about one of my favorite things in the whole world, which is reading and getting kids excited about reading. Just to give you a little bit of my background so you'll kind of know the lens through which I teach. I've been married for 28 years now, and we have 2 daughters. Our oldest is in college in her first year, and it's been so fun, so amazing just to get to watch that transformation. The process of letting go has not been easy, but it's the right time for that. And that's been fun to see her going from a classical education into a college setting. She's always been one who loves learning, and learning comes easily. We actually homeschooled back in the beginning of our journey with our kids. And then when this school opened, School of the Ozarks, we wanted to be a part of that. So she comes out of that in the high school years. Our younger daughter is in her second year of junior high, and learning did not come easily and still does not come easily for her. She has dyslexia, which we found out along the way in our homeschool journey. And that started me on a process of figuring out the keys to unlock for her the world of learning and understanding. So as I teach my 3rd grade classroom and as I talk to you today, I'm coming to you with this lens of having one child who I had to find extra things and rich things to keep her engaged, and one child who I had to really scramble to figure out a new way of teaching so that she could have the same enjoyment as my older daughter. So I don't know, some of you I know are homeschool moms. Some of you are classroom teachers. So I don't know about you, but at least in my classroom and in my family, I have kids with dyslexia. I have kids with working memory problems, with executive function. Their desks are just a war zone. Some with poor handwriting, some with slow processing, some with so much energy they don't know what to do with it, ADD, ADHD, some with trouble with abstract things in math, or even being able to visualize in reading. Some I have that are off the chart smart and can be very apathetic sometimes in class or bored. So you have this vast array of students, which honestly makes teaching so much more exciting and interesting, because if you had the same kind of student, I think teaching might be a little boring, year after year, lesson after lesson. But when you have all these variables and you have to figure out each one, boy, it keeps us on our toes and it keeps us on our knees. So today, I'm going to talk to you about how we reach all of these kids with the responsibility of teaching them how to read and how to learn. So today I'm going to hit 5 points. We're going to talk about these 5 things that have worked in my classroom and in my home as well. Number 1, I'm going to talk about reading aloud every single day. Number 2, I'm going to talk about making sure that your school or at home that you have a thorough phonics program and that you reinforce those rules and those phonograms frequently. I'm going to talk to you about the secret codes to discover meaning when you're reading. So helping those kids learn those little codes that some kids just learn automatically and some kids don't. 4th, I'm going to talk about opening up the world of words for your students. And then 5th, this has been a game changer in my classroom, and it's read alouds, doing read alouds every week of the year. And it has skyrocketed, where the title comes from, my students' reading fluency from this simple activity that we do every week. And I'll tell you all about it. But first, I want to tell you about some of those kids I described with, all the different learning styles and learning issues. This year, I have a couple of students, and one in particular is probably, in my 5 years of teaching here, maybe the most struggling reader I've had. Reading is very slow and labored. He is getting some Barton tutoring, yay, which is amazing, and I have seen huge growth. But at the beginning of the year, it was a huge task thinking about him sitting in my classroom as I'm sharing these amazing books, and yet I know there's no way that he can open this book and get from it anything other than a few choppy words. And so I want to share with him this amazing gift of reading, just like all the other students are going to get. And yet, as we did these 5 things in the classroom, I have seen him ask his parents for the 39 Clues books, and currently he has about 18 of them, I don't even know how many there are, stacked in his cubby, because there's a group of boys in my room that call themselves the 39 Clues Club. And they read these books, they get some from the library, and they read them together, and they try to discover the clues. And he wanted his mom and dad to buy the books so he could have the cards, because they have little clues on the cards. And yet I knew at the beginning, he's not reading these books, but yet he's a part of this club. He's looking at the cards, and he's helping his buddies, and they're trying to figure out the clues. And I just thought, this is what it's all about. He's not feeling like an outsider that can't read those books. He's joining in, and he's doing what he can, and he has grown leaps and bounds. So I tell you just that little story to say, that's what we want for our kids. We want them, no matter if they're struggling or bored, we want them to form little clubs about books or learning and, talk about it at recess and check things out and look at them and study them. That is our goal. And that is one of the biggest privileges of teaching, is when you see that happen. So, even in the Bible, it talks about this very thing. Our great privilege as a teacher isn't just standing up and just giving the information, but in Deuteronomy 11:18-21, it says, "Fix these words of mine in your hearts and minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands. Bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children. Talking about them when you sit down at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates, so that your days and the days of them and the days of your children may be many in the land the Lord swore to give to your ancestors, as many of the days that the heavens are above the earth." So even in the Bible, it talks about, making this goal of learning active and something you do together and enjoy together. So I'm going to model this for you in number 1. So on your handout, you can kind of follow along as we go through each point. I tried to leave some white space if you want to jot any notes down. And please hear me, I am not an expert on this. This is just how the Lord has helped me in my home, and the Lord has helped me in my classroom. But I remind the other teachers around me in the hallway frequently, I am a work in progress. This last talk on classroom management was amazing, and I just wanted to soak it all in. I'm a work in progress. So read aloud to your class every single day. Well, in 3rd grade, we read 10 books. And one of the highlights of my year is getting to read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe with them. And then we read The Magician's Nephew. We actually start that on Monday. I cannot wait. We actually read them in this order for a reason. We read them in the order that C.S. Lewis wrote them. And we talk about that, how he wrote them in that order. But I love then, on Monday, we'll start reading The Magician's Nephew, and we'll talk about how he goes back in time and how they will begin to notice things. And the students then will make the connections between the books, and they'll realize, oh, that's how Narnia began. And it's such a joy. But one of my favorite days of the year when reading aloud, and I read aloud every day. In fact, most of these books, I'm reading aloud to them in class. Because if I want them to be able to read, I want them to have in their mind what good reading sounds like. And so many kids nowadays are being raised by videos, and I am guilty. I am very guilty. But they're being raised on technology, and they're not being read to like they used to. So here's one of my favorite days of the year in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I believe it's chapter 1. Lucy looks into a wardrobe. Just going to read a section of it. Looking into the inside, she saw several coats hanging up, mostly long fur coats. There was nothing Lucy liked so much as the smell and feel of fur. She immediately stepped into the wardrobe and got in among the coats and rubbed her face against them, leaving the door open, of course, because she knew that it is very foolish to shut oneself into any wardrobe. Soon she went further in and found there was a second row of coats hanging up behind the first one. It was almost quite dark in there, and she kept her arms stretched out in front of her so as not to bump her face into the back of the wardrobe. She took a step further in, then 2 or 3 more steps, always expecting to feel the woodwork against the tips of her fingers, but she could not feel it. This must be a simply enormous wardrobe, thought Lucy, going still further in and pushing the soft folds of the coats aside to make room for her. Then she noticed there was something crunching under her feet. I wonder, is that more mothballs? She thought, stooping down to feel it with her hand. But instead of feeling the hard, smooth wood of the floor of the wardrobe, she felt something soft and powdery and extremely cold. "This is very queer," she said, and went on a step or two further. Next moment, she found that what was rubbing against her face and hands was no longer soft fur, but something hard and rough and even prickly. "Why, it is just like the branches of a tree," exclaimed Lucy. And then she saw that there was a light ahead of her. Not a few inches away where the back of the wardrobe ought to have been, but a long way off. Something cold and soft was falling on her. A moment later, she found that she was standing in the middle of a wood at nighttime, with snow under her feet and snowflakes falling through the air. I love that passage, and you can probably tell by the way I read it. But I want you to know, and I want to inspire you to read that way. You know, C.S. Lewis went to the trouble of writing it that way. Let's read it so that the words come out of the book and the students are allowed to, or they're able to hear them and understand them and sense them. And if you notice, some of it I even act out a little bit. Now, my students are supposed to be following along as we're reading, but you know, they look up. And for those students who struggle with visualizing, being able to picture what's going on is so important to being able to comprehend what's going on, to be able to remember the story. If they cannot visualize it, they read it and they move on and they have no memory of it. They have no understanding of it. They're just pretty words and that they're enjoying in the moment, but they're gone. So you want them to be able to visualize it. And so by using the little motions, I'm trying to help them picture, I'm trying to force into their brains a movie of this or a picture of snowflakes and snow crunching. Because some students, they don't know how to do that. And so we're going to have to show them how to visualize. We're going to have to show them how to read the words slow enough for themselves to be able to get that picture and to be able to see that movie in their minds. And so that's one reason why I read it that way. I want to bring it to life so they can picture it themselves. I also tell them, please don't watch this movie if you haven't seen it yet. Wait till you're done, and I promise you will love watching it after, because we want them to have their own vision of what Lucy looks like as she goes out of the wardrobe. Because some of those things they'll remember their whole lives. So, read to your class every single day. Number one, by all means, choose literature books that you love. I don't know if you have any, say, at your school. And usually it's really easy to find those books that you love. Number two, share your love and enthusiasm with your students. Tell them why you love it or why you love that author so much. And then let them start sharing their opinions, which books they like. We talk about Sarah Plain and Tall at the beginning of the year. We start small. That's my smallest book that we read together. We talk about how, I love the character of Sarah. Then right now, we just finished The Long Winter, which was on purpose read during January and February. And I just now feel like finally the winter ended on Thursday. I could not be more grateful, if only it would cooperate outside. And I talk about Laura Ingalls Wilder, I love it because of the way she describes things. Or we talk about Homer Price in the fall, and my boys love that book. And we talk about the adventures and how he is so creative, and he's so like some of the boys in my classroom who can dream up these inventions and go on these crazy adventures with their buddies. So I share with them why I love it, why I love the author. And then number 3, read in a way that your voice itself delivers the message as much as the words. In other words, read like a rock star. I did have read like an opera singer, and as I was going over it with my husband, he was like, I don't like reading like an opera singer. I was like, all right, how about rock star? Number 2, so we're going to read aloud. Number 2, we're going to make sure our school is using a thorough phonics program and reinforce those phonograms and good reading practices frequently. This is kind of the nuts and bolts. They're not going to be able to read these words until you have in kindergarten and first grade and second grade looked at the rules and studied. So, and our school actually right now is looking at what we're using, and it's not perfect. And so we're really trying to figure that out. What is the best way for our students to learn these phonograms and rules? Number 1, make the phonics lesson multisensory whenever possible. So for especially those strugglers, they need to hear it, see it, touch it, move it. So make them that way. Here's some examples. Number 2, use meaningful movement to help cement the memory of a phonogram. For example, we use the Johnny Can Spell phonogram cards. There are 70. We go through them every day. So an example of meaningful movement, and we do it this way every time we say this phonogram, number 31, the of early. And I say early, I draw it out so they will look up and see me tugging at my ear, because the word early is spelled E-A-R-L-Y. And so every time I say this phonogram, I tug my ear and I draw out the word. So in their brains, hopefully, they're visualizing the word E-A-R or the phonogram E-A-R. Another one, number 3, using catchy chants to help cement that phonogram rule in their brain. Now, I cannot take credit for this. There is an amazing second grade teacher that, I get her students, Chrissy Martin. She's actually presenting over there. She came up with this one. So, the of nurse. She came up with the catchy phrase, you are hurt when you go to the nurse. Every time we say this phonogram, we say that little phrase. I guarantee you the students know how to spell the word nurse because they know you are hurt when you go to the nurse. So anytime you can come up with those catchy little sayings, anything with a movement or with a catchy phrase, anything like that helps. Number 4, make sure to point out, to highlight when students are using good reading practices. I love to do this, especially my strugglers that feel like they will never be a good reader, like Johnny over here. So I try to point out and I say, did you see, like if a student gives an answer, I'll say, did you see how Johnny was studying the illustration to help him figure out that word? That's what good readers do. Good readers look at the pictures, they pay attention, and he sits up a little straighter. Or, man, Susie's doing what good readers do. She is noticing details. So even if it's not about a reading passage, even in math, I might say that. Good students notice things. If they notice something new in the classroom, Miss Janke, look, there's that new poster. Good readers, they always notice things. And so, it's giving some confidence, but it's also just reinforcing good practices. All right. So we're going to read aloud. We're going to make sure we're using a good phonics program and making it multisensory. Number 3, with every opportunity, share with your students the secret codes for discovering a written work's meaning. Now, for a lot of your readers, they just understand these things. They can, by synthesis, they just learn these things. But there are students that don't get it. They don't know the codes. Every time they sit down with a passage, It might look like decoding a secret code where they have to go every letter and figure out what that's saying. So we're going to do everything we can to help them unlock those codes. For example, begin each book with just enough of a book walk to pique their interests, make them thirsty for the story ahead, but also not belaboring the point. Sometimes I have a little book walk form where they'll fill out the author and the title and the number of chapters, but I don't do that every time. I don't want to make starting every book the same, and I don't want it to become tedious, especially for those students who struggle with writing down. Now, I realize that is a good practice, and we do practice it. We just don't do it every time. We do it verbally. And so, Monday morning, we're going to get out The Magician's Nephew, and we're going to look at it first. We're going to talk about the cover art, what they think it is. And then I always tell those who have read it before or who have seen the movie, don't give away anything. If someone else hasn't read it, you have to keep that until everyone has read it. So we look at the cover, we read the back of the book. We talk about how a lot of times you can know what the book's about by reading the back, or inside the front cover you can read about it and find out. And so we read, the back of the book. Then we talk about maybe the table of contents and how many chapters are there, and look at the names of the chapters. What book is it? Is it Homer Price, where the titles appear in the chapter? I don't think it's Homer Price. And so we talk about how you be listening, and when you hear that title of that chapter pop up, raise your hand. And so they love looking for that. So we talk about that. We talk about, the title page. I have a little girl named Harper, and so she loves when the publisher is Harper Trophy or Harper whatever, Collins. So we talk about all those things that some kids just take for granted, but other kids, it's kind of unlocking this world for them. I also like to draw in my students. We read Sarah Plain and Tall first, and they all really like it. But then we read Homer Price second, and that's on purpose, because I want to draw in those boys. And before I even pass out the book, I tell the boys, oh, you boys are going to love this book. There are guns in here. There are robbers. Now, girls, I hope you can stick with us, because there's some guns. And the boys are, they can't wait. And so when we pass out the books, they are looking for and then they're finding the pictures with the bank robbers, the old-fashioned bank robbers with the handkerchiefs around their faces. And, they're telling each other. So I'm drawing them in. And it's not a gimmick, because it is going to have robbers in it. But I'm getting them excited for what they're going to discover. And then number 2, I touched on this just a little bit, and I wrote, this point is very important. Are you ready? Stop along the way and help students visualize. And as we said, many do not know how to visualize, and without being able to do that, they'll struggle with retaining the memory of the story and comprehension. As we're reading, I might stop where Lucy's crunching on the snow, or when the snowflakes are falling. I usually do stop then and I say, can you picture that? Can you picture little snowflakes hitting her cheeks? And so I'm painting my picture for them, for those who don't have that picture yet. And then after I model that several times, I'll stop and say, oh, what are you picturing? And let them share then what they're picturing. And it gets them then in the habit for those who aren't already doing that. All right, jumping on, number 4. All right, we talked about reading aloud, having a thorough phonics program, sharing the secret codes, and now we're going to open up the world of words. The words of worlds. So, this is almost like unlocking codes, because some kids, The written word is scary, and it's a code. It's a secret code for a club they're not a part of. So as teachers, we have the opportunity to open up this world to them and help them come join in. And how do we do this? We make words playful because they are. God is so creative in the way He allowed us to create different words and languages. And we want them to feel like they can use words. They can apply words. They are a part of that club. You play with words. If there's a word you read and you think, I like that word, I just tell my students, oh, don't you like that word, the way it sounds when you say it, like a bee buzzing? I just love that. So you talk about it. I rhyme a lot. In fact, I always get tired of telling students what page to turn to. So I might say, all right, students, let's turn to page 25. 25 will keep you alive. And so now they try to come up with little rhymes because sometimes my brain is tired and I can't think of a rhyme for 141. And so they're coming up with little rhymes. And what they don't know is we're playing with rhyming, and that's so important in phonics, knowing how to rhyme, hearing the rhyme. So that's just a small practical way I do it. I rhyme when I tell them what page number, and then I don't tell them again because then their partner can tell them. So rhyming words. You know, they have little activities, word ladders, being able to take a word and take one letter and change it into a different word and change another, change the beginning. So all of these kinds of activities make words usable. It makes them not as scary. It turns them into these codes that they can deal with and understand. It gives them little concrete ways to deal with those letters. Word harvesting, that's, going through a passage. Students, what words, do you really like on this page? What words are interesting to you? What words do you not understand? And there's so many activities then you could do if time were to allow, doing the 4-square vocabulary activity, or maybe you're jotting them on the board, or maybe you show them then how to look it up in a dictionary. There's all sorts of skills you can work here, but the idea is make words something they think about, whether it's in a vocabulary sense or in a sound, the way it sounds or the way it's written. Make those words something they use and something they can be a part of, that process. And then, of course, number 4, make Latin and Greek connections whenever possible. And, all of our words come from other languages. And so that's so interesting. I think I read recently that our scientific words mostly come from Latin, and our daily words, our daily life words, come from German. I just find that so interesting. So the conversation of the people was more German, but then the scientific and the more scholarly words came from Latin.